Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Back to school for BC students, including in the central Okanagan, where the impact of the McDougall Creek wildfire is still being felt. We'll hear from the school district up first. And whether it's stress from the wildfires or from the pressures that come with going back to school, we'll talk about managing youth anxiety. After 12:30, we'll ask, does artificial intelligence belong in the classroom? How can students and teachers navigate AI this year? I'm Michelle Eliot. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming too on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. It is back to school for thousands of students in the central Okanagan. Now, for many, it will not be a normal time. Some students have lost homes or been otherwise impacted by the McDougall Creek wildfire near West Kelowna. The blaze destroyed 189 structures and still continues to be a wildfire of note, according to the BC Wildfire Service. Kevin Cardle is a superintendent for School District 23 in the central Okanagan and joins us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. How has this morning gone?
Wonderful. It's been a very smooth opening, and students are back, teachers are back. Everyone's very excited to be back, and all our schools are open, even though 6 of them are on alert. And I just checked in with one up in Glen Rosa, Helen Gorman's principal, and they've had a great start.
And you talk about 6 still being on evacuation alert. One school in particular was under an evacuation order, and the blaze came quite close to that building, and that's the Rose Valley Elementary School. Can you tell us what happened with that school? Was there any damage?
No damage. The firefighters did a remarkable job. That school is still on alert. We're all open. We actually had 6 schools who were, I believe, at one time on order during the fire when it was, at its peak. That's changed over the weeks from the great work of firefighters and first responders, and we're now, all our schools are open for business. Fire came right down to the fence of that particular school, but the firefighters protected the building, protected the grounds, and it's up and fully operating. They did just an incredible job.
What will it mean for students and staff at those 6 schools that are still under evacuation alert?
Well, we're trying to provide routine, so it should be a regular opening. We will have, of course, some students who have been impacted by the wildfire, and they'll have experienced trauma on evacuation orders, etc. And we have some extra support at some of those schools where we know the communities have been most impacted, particularly where there's been, homes lost or students are still displaced. And so we're providing those supports in place. We, all did a refresher as senior leaders and principals, and we've got our expert staff out in those schools in this first week.
Okay, and the McDougall Creek fire, as I mentioned, is still a wildfire of note. The firefighters are still working on it, and it could still take some time. What does that mean then for those schools? Are they then, what is communication going to be like should, let's hope not sincerely, but should it be required that they evacuate?
Yeah, so we've been communicating with parents since the fire started, and as progress has been made. We work very closely with the emergency operations team who are leading the battle against the wildfire. We have software that can allow us to contact every parent within 15 minutes, and we have emergency plans that have been developed prior to coming back to school for each school in West Kelowna and in central Okanagan. But in particular for those schools still on alert, they have their plans in place. They'll review them with staff. We'll have buses nearby and available to pick up students and then transport them to our muster point, which would be a Mount Boucherie Secondary School at this time, if required. But we're also working with the Emergency Operations Center about, if possible, how much notice can we get before an evacuation order so that we can have parents pick up their kids in a normal way. It all depends on weather, of course, and wind. Fires are unpredictable. But I do know firefighters are up in the area and they're, preparing those fire breaks and really ready to protect the properties that are up in, for example, the Glen Rose area, which is right now where the fire is closest to.
Mm. And you mentioned normal once again there. What's the mood like? You said things have gone smoothly this morning, but that there will be help for students who have been affected. What is the impact on young people from the wildfire, the stress that comes with being displaced, the stress of having smoky skies throughout the summer? What is the impact on students? What are you watching for?
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate that there hasn't been as much smoke as there could have been in terms of smoky skies, and that is something that can create an issue. We do have protocols in place if we get too much smoke in the air, particularly to support students who, might have issues with breathing for a
Okay.
variety of reasons,
Right.
and we follow those protocols. Right now, we're pretty clear skies because of where the wind's blowing, and so
Mhm.
we've been very fortunate about that. Um,
What I
for
mean
the
is
kids, yeah,
emotionally, what
yeah,
kinds of challenges do you expect they may have, and what are you watching for?
yeah. So that emotionally, uh, you know, trauma impacts everyone differently. And so we do have our counselors in every school, and we do have, as I said, in the schools where we anticipate there was most impact, like Marjock Elementary and Rose Valley Elementary, where they were evacuated.
Hmm.
Uh, we do have experts from our staff who are experts in critical incidents response, and they work for staff and they help them understand what triggers are. But for the most part, right now, the mood in schools is everyone's excited to see their friends and they're excited to be back and see their teachers. That sort of routine and euphoria takes over. I think we'll see more of those other issues that start to come up in terms of dysregulated behavior and people being upset as that sort of we're back, euphoria wears off.
Yeah, and something to watch out for sure. But it sure is nice. I'm sure for you to be able to introduce some normalcy back into their lives, huh?
Yeah, routine is important, and I think just being in community, celebrating, learning, and being back together is a good step as we begin the recovery, and we're a part of that recovery.
Yeah, and certainly so much of the province is watching and have had their thoughts with the folks in central Okanagan and other affected regions as well in the province. Kevin, thank you so much for taking some time for us this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Kevin Cardle is the superintendent for School District 23 in the central Okanagan. And whether it is stress from the wildfires or general back to school blues, as we've been hearing, kids these days have a lot more to worry about. There's wildfires and climate anxiety, pressures from social media. It is a much different landscape than ever before. And we want to hear from you. Did you ever feel the same pressure, the same anxiety, the same back to school blues? How did you manage it in your own life? You can look back to your days as a student. And if you're the parent of a student right now, how is your own child feeling about going back to the classroom? And let us know. 1 800 825 5950 604 669 3733, star or pound 690. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And joining us for this conversation is Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. She's an author, parenting educator, and former BC child psychologist. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Lapointe.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
You were listening to our conversation with Kevin Cardle. He said right now, today, there's euphoria, excitement among the students returning and being able to see their friends again. But perhaps in the coming days, some of the trauma from the wildfires may appear. What do you imagine it is like for students? What should educators be looking out for?
Well, I think a couple of things that have been touched on, which are actually really important. The first is the importance of routine in the midst of all of this, that kids get to go back to what is normal. They get to watch the adults around them maneuvering in those spaces and places, and like life goes on. And so I think that that's something to really be aware of. I
Mm.
also think what Kevin said is important to bear in mind that as time marches forward, and sort of the excitement of these first couple of days wears thin, you might see that children fall into a more dysregulated kind of state where the emotional brain has become activated. And the way that kids present typically when they're dysregulated is through behavior. So as dysregulation, anxiety, trauma triggers, those kinds of things present, we tend to see kids dissolve into behaviors that maybe are a little bit challenging.
Yeah. And how can teachers be on the lookout for that, and parents, and how can they address it?
I think the important thing is perception, because oftentimes when kids present in those ways, we want to squash the behavior.
Right.
And the idea is to understand that the behavior is just an external facade. We need to get behind that behavior into the inner emotional world of that child and really help them feel understood, create a safe place for them to express all of the worries and different things that they might have going on the inside, and then watch as that begins to dissipate. We talk about the concept of co-regulation. In these cases, it will not be the child's job to fix their emotional state. It'll be the job of all of the grown-ups, the parents and the teachers and the special education assistants and those kinds of folks, to come alongside those children and regulate them from the outside so the child can feel settled on the inside.
Right. And not to fix their behavior, but to try and get to the bottom of things. This is all hitting very close to home for me as a parent of two teenagers. Not to, I always want to fix everything and say everything's going to be fine, but really it's digging deeper. And so when it comes to that, what are the conversations we can have with our children then?
Kids are really interesting that way, because if you hit the nail on the head, they often don't want to speak about it. And so in order to door open conversations, it's really about showing up for work as a parent, even if you're not being put to work. So be available to the conversations. Make sure that you're the one, driving them to the after school activity. Be hanging out in the central areas of your home, your living room, your kitchen. I have teen boys as well. And I know that that's where they're going to come, so that if they have something on their mind, you've created repeated opportunities for them to bring that forward.
That is so true. I read somewhere that you don't necessarily have to give them advice, just be there to listen. And you
That's
don't.
right.
I love that behind you on your wall in the room that you're in talking to us from, it says, "See it, feel it, be it," in a quite large font. What does that mean to you?
Letters, I suppose, put on that wall, especially for today, it seems. That is the mantra that I've been using for years and years as I've worked alongside parents to help their kids. And the idea is that you can see the behavior, but that's like a 0.5-second job. Immediately, then we have to go behind what we see and feel it for the child. So you might see a kid who's reactive or talking back or not following along, but let's get behind the behavior and feel for the child where it is that behavior is coming from. And I've always said that if you can feel for the child where the behavior is coming from, then you don't need me or any other kind of support person, because you will naturally then be for the child what it is that they need you to be in those moments.
Oh, that's wonderful. What a great way to summarize things. I love it. I may just write that on my wall behind me as well. Dr. Vanessa Lapointe is with me, author, parenting educator, former BC child psychologist. And we're asking you, if you're the parent of a student right now, how is your child feeling about going back to school, about summer vacation ending, and how do you manage student stress? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 on your cell phone, and you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. And so, beyond wildfires, which is very current for many students around BC, what are the other stressors of going back to school?
I think it's a couple of things. One is I think that there's a big kind of social stress. As much as kids love going to school, some kids, to be around friends and get to see people that they haven't seen for a long time, it also means that you're on, for 6 or 7 hours a day. So I think that that's a big thing for kids. the other part of that, somewhat related, is that you are having to be on in other ways when you go to school. Essentially, when you're at school, you are performing. You've got to make the grade and you've got to cross the
Right.
T's and dot the I's and do the things and follow the rules. And that can be a big stressor for kids, especially coming out of the lazy days of summer where they haven't had to really think about those things quite so much.
And so, how can they prepare themselves from that or ensure that they get those breaks from having to perform or be on?
Well, I think the first thing is that we want to name it to tame it, which means that when we just sort of speak truth about, 'cause sometimes it's hard. You go back to school and they feel like long days and you got to do all this stuff, huh? So you have that kind of conversation. We name it to tame it. And then the other piece is to make sure that kids are getting the message early on about the idea of caring for self, because that's certainly a lesson many of us as adults missed when we were children, and that it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to, take a walk down the hall, ask to go use the washroom, volunteer to carry something back to the library so that you can just sort of move your body and take a few deep breaths and not feel like you're having to be on all the
Hmm.
time.
Okay, but then they may come back to you and say, but how will I get into the college that I want or the university that I want if I'm constantly taking breaks? I need to always be working.
That's right. And I have a child in grade 11 year, and grade 11 year is one of the most stressful years for
Same
kids
here,
because
yes.
they're acutely aware that the grades that they get this year will be on the transcripts that they're using to apply to those post-secondary places. And so the idea is you don't have time to not have time to rest.
Hmm.
When we care for ourselves and we fill our cups up, then we are pouring from a full cup rather than an empty cup. And there's so much data now to support that taking space for meditation, taking space for exercise, taking space to just rest and relax is actually going to fuel your brain and make the time that you are spending working and studying be that much more effective. So you do not have time to not have time.
Yes, yeah, that is. It's almost ironic in that way, or it's not instinctive to think I need to take a break. Actually, that will help me with being able to do the job that I need to do. And how much does social media affect everything? You know, that need to always be on, as you say, and be plugged in.
I think it's huge.
Yeah.
I think kids today, compared to when I was a teen, they really do have a lot more pressure upon them to be presenting in a certain way, to be showing up in a certain way, and to be living up to that social media myth of perfection. And so
Mm.
that's a big stressor and a lot of feedback, and really is upon us to teach our children to be wise contributors to and consumers of social media because of the impact it has on them.
Yeah, and how can we do that then? How can we teach them those values?
I think to have very open conversations about social media and really what it's all about. There's a beautiful tool actually put forward by the Dove Self-Esteem Project called the Dove Confidence Kit. Parents can download it for free. And it's something that I recommend to a lot of parents because it actually coaches you how to have the conversations, what sorts of conversations to be having, teaching your kids about how to edit their feeds, the benefits of muting certain people, unfollowing certain people, and to really be aware of the sort of underworld of social media and
Mm,
why we have to be very wise about how we step into that world.
yeah. Um, and what about for parents? What are some tips you can share for how parents can survive the year ahead?
That which is to the greatest good of self will be to the greatest good of all. So, same as
Yeah.
your kids, for you as parents, you got to top your own cups up too, because you're going to be in demand and you are the ones that are front and center when it comes to supporting your kids who might be struggling with some anxiety or low mood because of that return to school.
Mm,
I really love the idea of stepping into this time with an energy of swagger, which really is a word that I use to describe how you stand tall and know that you don't need to know all of the answers for your kids. You just get to be the answer. It's more about an energy and a presence in terms of how you show up, that you are there, you are supporting, you are inviting forward those feelings, even the challenging behaviors that come with them. Because at the end of the day, you've got this, and your kids are looking to you to step into that role.
What was the term? Energy
Energy and swagger.
and swagger. Okay. I
That's
wanted
right.
to make sure everybody heard that. Okay, put on your swagger and be there for the kids this year and take time for yourself too. All really good advice. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Have a good year.
And you.
Dr. Vanessa Lapointe is an author, parenting educator, a former BC child psychologist. 12:26 now, 1:36 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on CBC Gem. CBC Vancouver is where you can find us on YouTube, and you can also watch us on our own website, cbc.ca/BC. Well, back to school is not just an event for the kids. It does involve the whole family, and something parents and guardians know well. Our Philip O'Weara spoke to families who were yesterday enjoying the very last day of peony this year.
For many, the last day of the peony signifies the end of summer, and this year, thousands of people decided to make the most of it.
Today's the last day of the peony. How do you feel?
Nervous
Why are you nervous?
because I just love the peony and I enjoy the rides a lot.
We actually got here right at open, and we went right to Hunky Bill's and got our breakfast, and then we just came out of the Superdog show.
For most parents, the last day of the peony also means the start of the school year.
Can't wait.
Are you prepared?
Looking forward to school starting. Get them back out of the house. Yeah, that's right.
Well, we're getting back into it, so back into school starting, sports starting. Kids are excited, and as parents, we're excited as well. Get back into the swing of things.
With a house, with a car.
The peony says this is the first time the fair has fully returned since the pandemic began. Despite a slow start to the season due to wildfires impacting travel and weather conditions, organizers say families still came out in droves.
Last year we did about 529,000 guests through the fair. We'll be significantly above that this year. The Labor Day weekend we do 30% of our overall attendance, so we'll see where we get to today.
The final concert of the fair isn't just the last of the season. It's the final concert the current amphitheater will host before it's torn down and construction begins for its replacement. Philip O'Weara, CBC News, Vancouver.
My neighbor was heading out yesterday with the stroller for two little kids heading out to the peony. And I just said, good luck making your way through those crowds on the last day of the peony. Lovely piece. Thank you very much, Philip. Well, Friday on the program, we took your calls on interest rate hikes in light of Premier David Eby writing an open letter to the Bank of Canada governor, urging him to halt the increases. Eby said he was speaking up for British Columbians who were suffering from interest rate hikes. We got a lot of response and many emails too, and here are some of them. John and Courtney wrote, David Eby has lots of mechanisms within his powers as Premier to lower the cost of living for British Columbians. This is nothing more than passing the buck rather than doing something substantive. On one hand, we had Pierre Poilievre criticizing the Bank of Canada. Now we've got our Premier trying to pressure it. This behavior doesn't belong in a G7 nation. And Kevin wrote us, I think what David Eby did is fine. It shows he is standing up for British Columbians. I'm wondering about the timing of inflation. We increased the inflation rate before Christmas and then complained after that the economy didn't shrink. We increased inflation before summer when everyone was spending money on trips. People are going to spend money at those times regardless. And John wrote from Fort Simpson, the Bank of Canada is independent, but it's not immune to oversight and feedback. They have a duty to explain themselves more effectively, and Eby's letter is a reflection that there are viewpoints they have not fully addressed. Of course, he should write publicly to stimulate the Bank of Canada to be more forthright. Thank you very much for all of your emails. You can always write us, bctoday@cbc.ca. It is 12:30 now, 1:30 in the Mountain Time Zone. And coming up in our next half hour, we're going to ask, does artificial intelligence belong in the classroom? And how can students and teachers navigate this new world of ChatGPT and AI? That's coming up after the CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The Vancouver Island Health Authority is extending the overnight closure of the Saanich Peninsula Hospital Emergency Department. The closures have been ongoing since early July because of a staffing shortage. They were supposed to end yesterday, but the health authority says staffing issues have not been resolved. The district of Tofino is pleading with people in the community to conserve water. It says its reservoirs are the lowest they have been all year. Stage 3 water restrictions are already in effect, and local officials say they might have to impose a state of local emergency if they have to move to stage 4. And higher borrowing costs combined with seasonal patterns are putting the housing market on track for slowing sales and price stabilization in Metro Vancouver. The Real Estate Board says there were nearly 4,000 new listings last month, a roughly 18% increase from a year earlier. The composite benchmark price for the Vancouver area is now above $1.2 million. And now the forecast. Air quality statements continue for several areas due to wildfire smoke. On the north coast, showers this afternoon with a high of 14, a high of 15 with smoke and a chance of showers in the Peace. In the central interior, a mix of sun and cloud with widespread smoke and a high of 14 degrees. Highs up to 23 with some sun and cloud in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 24. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, sunshine this afternoon with highs up to 20 degrees. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
And welcome back to this time slot, Rob.
Thank you, Michelle. It has been a while, like 6 weeks.
A while,
My
yes.
goodness.
You were off and then you were doing the early mornings. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
I wasn't sure if I got that right. I was trying to think my throw to you. I hope that was okay. It's been a while.
Yes, exactly. What time of day is it?
Yeah.
Is it so over the last couple of weeks, was this around the time you were heading over to the tennis court?
I was playing some tennis.
Yeah.
Yes, I was.
I know
Yes.
you well.
Yes, pretty much every day. Yes, doing some tennis.
Great. Well, it was pretty good weather to enjoy that.
It sure was.
And you can continue.
Still is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's still going to continue this week. Okay, Rob, welcome back to
Thank you,
the noon
Michelle.
hour. It is the noon hour. Thanks
It
very
is.
much.
See you.
Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on the CBC Gem app, on cbc.ca/BC, and on YouTube. You can find us by searching up CBC Vancouver. As we've been talking about, students are once again hitting the books. And these days, that could include the use of artificial intelligence. AI tools like ChatGPT have taken hold in classrooms, and many are divided on whether AI can help or hurt learning. We'd like to hear what you think. Do you think AI belongs in the classroom? And how can students and teachers navigate the new world of AI this school year? What are your questions perhaps about how AI can be used to influence student learning and their futures? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690, and you can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. In a few minutes, we'll hear from the Vancouver School District on how they are navigating AI in classrooms. Right now, in our studio, I'm joined by Terry Griffith, who's a professor at Simon Fraser University and the Keith Beattie Chair in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Very happy to be here.
Well, first, I'll ask you, we're talking about how AI is taking hold in classrooms. Does it belong there? How are students using it in the first place?
Students are using it in all sorts of ways, either in thinking about how to get a first draft done. Some, unfortunately, might be thinking about how to get work done without putting in their own effort.
Their own work, okay.
That could happen.
Yeah.
But really, what an opportunity to have a breadth of approaches to getting your classroom work done that you didn't have before. It's got to be a very exciting fall.
So you see it as an opportunity. It doesn't seem to you that it may detract from student learning?
I think it's going to be a combination. So very excited to hear what the school district has to say, because it's the school districts, the teachers,
the parents and the students that are going to really determine how this plays out.
Sure. And for yourself, what's different for you this year then?
It's going to be a wild fall. I've already met with my students, and I said, this is going to be the first time you have basically an intern who's going to help you do your work.
Right.
And they were a little bit surprised. These are all working professionals, and they said, we're allowed to use it. And I said, if you don't, it's going to be a lot harder than it needs to be.
Okay. And that's an interesting demographic as well, because they're working professionals who may have this ethos, right, of I do everything on my own. And so for educators, what is the approach? Because you can use ChatGPT, for example, to just put in a couple of words and things come back to you. So how do you use that to your benefit?
Yeah, to be able to take a step back and actually say, give me 3 alternative ways to open up this essay, or give me 4 examples that draw on this kind of a setting or social situation, and then be able to weave those things and add your own sort of perspective on it. You had your own perspective in asking about the particular thing you wanted it to tell you, and then you get to pick and choose about which information to weave into the final product.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's a lot to unpack there, right? Let's introduce our next guest here right now before we go to our first call, because as we've been talking about universities, that is where this issue is playing out, but it's also playing out in high schools as well. So we'd like to hear from you. If you're a parent or a teacher, if you're a high school student or university student, do you think AI belongs in the classroom? And how can students and teachers navigate AI this school year? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And as I mentioned, teachers in Vancouver, like everybody else, are learning to adapt to AI. Jeff Spence is the district principal for learning and information technology. Good afternoon, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on, Michelle.
What's your own approach to AI in the Vancouver district?
Well, we're not afraid of it, and we realize that it's really early days. I'm excited to hear that Terry is also taking the positive approach to it. What I did right away back, I guess it released around in December. And so right in January, there was a lot of drama and, oh, the kids are cheating, the sky is falling. But I don't believe the sky is falling, and we need to really know what we're learning about. So
but
what we've done is we're trying to roll out a whole bunch of learning for the educators and have them use it.
And okay, so they have been using it themselves. But how do you address concerns that this is, the sky is falling, that this is being seen or can be seen by students as a way to cheat? How do you address those concerns?
There's so many ways of cheating. There's even books written on cheating culture. But I'd like to shift that talk into a learning culture. There will always be people who abuse or try to game the system. But there is so much opportunity to take away the boring side of what we do. I've seen it being used in a variety of different ways. An example might be to write a cover letter for a job that you're applying for.
How would you go? Can you take me through the steps? How do you do that?
Yeah, it's super interesting because I signed up and then I went through it myself. So you can get a free account at OpenAI. So if you just go to OpenAI.com, sorry, I forget, OpenAI. And,
the AI can tell you just.
And you can then just type in, write me a cover letter for a job to work at the Vancouver School Board. And it'll write a cover letter. And then you go, oh, that's not the kind of job that I wanted. So you can refine what you've asked. Say, write me a cover letter for a job starting in the information technology department at the Vancouver School Board with a focus on data and data handling. And then it's oh, wow, that's fantastic. So you're able to refine and iterate what you're looking for.
Okay.
But still, I found I had to go back in and make some changes to it.
Right.
And so I was just doing this as an exercise. And also I walked principals through this exercise. And they, in fact, then went and had big public show and tells with students. So imagine 500 students in an assembly, and the principal of the school is up there with OpenAI saying, this is how you cheat. But really, it's not how you cheat. It's, how you use the information that's at your fingertips.
Okay, so how do you use that information? Because then if the artificial intelligence has written the cover letter for you, can a student really say, I wrote this letter? Isn't there an expectation from the potential employer that this is you expressing yourself?
I would expect that the discussion between the teacher and the students, because that's really where the relationships are, that relationship, I guess, fosters the discussion about what's mine and what's not mine. And this is not a new discussion at all. In fact, we have procedures and guidelines about cheating, and this is nothing new. It's a new technology and it offers new opportunities. But 5 years from now, we'll be talking about something else that's come along, and then there's something else that's come along.
So,
and you can just go backwards talking in the same way. Calculators, for example.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's true. What's mine and what's not mine? I'd love to ask Terry about
do you
that
remember,
in a
Do you
moment.
remember a calculator question or a test you've probably written, and right on the top, no calculators allowed?
Right. Yeah. You're talking to someone who just did the bare minimum for math, so may not be the best person to ask that. Finally, what's your message to teachers this year then in the coming year in Vancouver?
Oh, we have to make ourselves aware of what's going on. And so I'm encouraging teachers to sign up on their own, try it out, practice it, talk to students about it, show what it can do. We already have many teachers doing this. They'll even give an assignment that involves AI, and if the students choose to take that option, then they'll return back to class with what they found, what the AI wrote, and they analyze it. Because there's mistakes.
Yeah.
It's not perfect.
Right. It's almost learning how to think alongside it, isn't it?
Yes.
Jeff, really, it's going to be an interesting year, isn't it? As Terry said, it's going to be a wild year ahead on the AI front. Thanks so much for giving us the insight into how you're approaching it in Vancouver.
Oh, thank you.
Jeff Spence is a district principal for learning and information technology. We're taking your calls as well. My guest is Terry Griffith, a professor at Simon Fraser University, asking you, do you think AI belongs in the classroom? It is already here. So how do you think teachers and students can navigate the world of AI? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can hit pound 690. Roman is calling us from Port Alberni. Hi, Roman.
Good morning. What a beautiful day it is today.
It is gorgeous. And is it cloudy? It's a bit cloudy here. The sun is peeking through. How are things in Port Alberni?
Well, you know what? I'm actually in Tofino. I'm normally based out of Port Alberni, and it's beautiful weather. There are just enough clouds in the sky to give it a beautiful, picturesque backdrop feel. And yeah, I feel like I'm in a Dances with Wolves movie right now.
Wonderful. And the Highway 4 is now open too, so you can travel more freely.
Yeah.
Good to hear from you. Good to hear from you again, Roman. And what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I'm thankful that your guest there gave me a good segue into this, because I think, like anything else, my thoughts on AI, and I work with computer technology quite extensively, my thoughts on AI in the classroom have two main critical parts I should say, just use the word concerned about. The fact that AI is not infallible, that it's artificial intelligence, which means it's still learning. So maybe it doesn't have the full agency yet to differentiate facts from unverified facts and outright lies. And it finds things that'll fit in the pieces of the puzzle with some sort of algorithm. But is it the truth, or is it just the story that fits the request?
Right.
That's the first part. And the second part, and it goes to the point that was being discussed by you as with the calculator rule, is this going to impede or impair the critical thinking capacities of students at that age, where they're learning valuable fundamental basics? They're building their foundation of critical thinking. Being able to push a button and speak into a mic and say, give me this, and have that turned out like a vending machine Pop-Tart. Is it the path of least resistance, but is it also the shortest path, if you know what I mean? Because I think to use the metaphor of the butterfly, most people know that if you help a butterfly get out of its cocoon, you may impair the rest of its life, because the struggle to get its wings out actually helps the wing to grow and flourish the way they need to grow. Whereas if you cut open the cocoon and help set them free, they're never going to be free, because their path to freedom was too easy, and they've not brought along any experience or any sort of critical thinking building that has helped them get to that point of freedom.
Yeah, you bring up a couple of really good points and concerns there, Roman. Thank you so much. Enjoy the beautiful day in Tofino.
I'm gonna turn off my thinking cap now and then just enjoy the beauty.
That's right. Give yourself a good break. What a lovely place to do that into. That's Roman joining us from Port Alberni. My guest here in studio, Terry Griffith's a professor at Simon Fraser University. What do you make of his concerns? One is that, yes, AI is not infallible. It can come up with errors, but the problem is, too, is it so confidently presents you with that errant answer, right?
Absolutely. I wish it gave us a little signal about, I'm 90% sure,
Right.
I'm 75% sure. But his comment about the cocoon was fabulous.
Yes.
And what I would say in response to that one is, if the situation were staying the same, like it is for the butterfly, that makes complete sense. But the world is shifting around our students and all of us who are working with these tools. So if I don't have that skill set, I'm not going to be strong in that new direction. So the older direction, now that becomes easier. It becomes more a task of, how do I learn to ask the question? I'm still using a lot of critical thinking and learning how to prompt the AI to give me what I need, and then having it give me alternatives so that I'm then choosing between a variety of approaches I could take for the problem. I think that's a very hard task, and one worthy for these students to take on.
Is it a case then where we are just going along for the ride rather than the path of least resistance, or how much should we be listening to those concerns and perhaps slowing down the train?
I don't really want to slow down the train, and you've already acknowledged that I'm pretty positive on this. Where I do think it's such a challenge is, how do we learn what kinds of new assignments we need to be offering up to the students?
Okay.
What's the new project that really will let them kind of go to a higher bar, given they have a whole new set of tools?
Right. What are you demanding of your students this year then in light of that?
I hate to say this on air, but I'm doubling their workload.
Yeah.
Now, to their benefit, these are things that they use in their own organizations. So instead of doing 3 of playbooks, this is a tool I use, they're going to do 6 of these playbooks, and that means double the amount of product that they can bring back into their own jobs. So I see that as a benefit. It will absolutely be an experiment in terms of how they think it's playing out. And I know my TA and I have got to come to grips with, how do we then manage providing feedback on twice as much work?
Oh, yes, exactly. And how will you use artificial intelligence in that?
Yeah, I think for this first year, which I'm thinking of as an experiment, we're going to just power through that double work. But where we will use AI is in asking the AI to give us additional feedback to offer to the students. So how could you have made this even better? And we'll do that through the first assignment, and then maybe the second assignment, I'll be asking the students to do that on their own with the AI.
Now, you mentioned your students who are working professionals felt quite torn about relying on artificial intelligence. And this has been, a debate among students, too. My guest, Terry Griffith, a professor at Simon Fraser University, the Keith Beattie Chair in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And yes, some students have been divided themselves. A few months ago, ChatGPT, in the face of that controversy around the potential for cheating, the company launched a new tool which was aimed at helping teachers detect if a student or artificial intelligence has done the work. And so at the time, here's what some university students at Western University in Toronto had to say.
When you're using Grammarly or any of those other tools that are there to help you with your writing, you still need to know how to write. But this tool where it's like creating something completely new for you, that's plagiarism. It's taking somebody else's idea, even if it's a computer's idea, and creating it and then submitting it, you're not actually learning anything. The whole point of writing an essay is showing that you have learned the content and that you're able to express that through your writing. So if you're getting a computer to do it for you, you've learned nothing. You're expressing nothing.
I mean, it's pretty crazy. I've already seen a lot of people using it for like schoolwork and stuff like that.
I feel like computers are the future. Like, a bunch of people are developing a bunch of softwares, AIs, and ChatGPT, I feel like it's just the beginning. And progressively, I feel like in a few years, it's going to be even more efficient AI.
Yeah, we create AI to help make our life better and easier every day. But as I can see, we kind of like abusing it rather than using it.
I've kind of seen it on TikTok, but that's about it. I haven't heard my classmates or my friends talking about it. Because what's the point of coming to university if you're just gonna I don't know, not really do the studying or put in the work. You're not doing the work yourself. You're getting the AI to generate it. And while it's not another person per se, it's still not you. So I feel like that still, counts as cheating.
I've heard that profs are a little hesitant on the legitimacy of papers as a result of programs such as these. So I've not personally used it myself, but I know of people who have. Professors are going to have to come to the realization that this is the future or some version of it. I would say this might incentivize professors to, make assignments that are a little different, that might test students in a different way, knowing this information, and that, simple regurgitation of facts aren't going to cut it for students.
Those are some students at Western University speaking earlier this year. And Terry Griffith, SFU professor, is with me. That last comment sort of touched on what you were talking about, which is, adapt or adjust your curriculum or the way you teach or test to accommodate what AI can do.
Well, and those students were making very strong comments about what work is theirs.
Yes, and plagiarism came up.
Yeah, and I'll say that one of the things that the school districts, the universities, the faculty at all levels have to do is help the students understand how to appropriately reference their sources and who did what work, who said what thing, and then to take ownership of whatever they turn in. So if that AI gave you the wrong stuff and it gives me wrong information all the time, but I know that it's wrong, so I can go back and find, the information that should be there. But I'm also going to be asking the students to tell me what prompts they used, what was their workflow, and not so much because I want to check up on them, but it's because we're all going to be trying different methods, and we need to learn the ones that are actually most effective.
Okay, that gets to critical thinking as well, doesn't it? I remember having to be very diligent about those references, writing university essays too. We have an email from David, who wrote us at bctoday@cbc.ca. David writes, over the past year, generative AI use has arrived into the classroom and student uses. Students need to start with baseline critical thinking and foundational skills, in my view, before experimenting with generative AI tools. Now, the issue is especially problematic for new English language learners who are just beginning to build their journey into critical thinking, research, and writing skills in English. And AI optimists seem to ignore this cohort. What kind of challenges would that bring for, let's talk about new English language learners?
Yeah, they will, I expect, be able to see the grammar that we're expecting as native speakers. And if they can ask it to show their first draft, show an updated draft, and then ask it to do an analysis of what grammar rules, what did I miss? Right? So you can have the AI actually acting as a tutor to evaluate the work that you have already done, but that may not be top of mind for them. So again, the teacher's role is so critical here, helping people and guiding them on how the tool can help them not just generate the homework, but how to actually teach me how to do that work better. If we think about when Khan Academy first came out, and
this is the math website, right?
Well, math and so many other things that really help people change how they approached problems. They were maybe not in class getting a full explanation, and they could go back and study it until they did get it. Same sort of story here. If we know to ask the AI about how it could help us learn something better.
Okay, it's learning more about the act of learning and getting again to the root foundational skills, as David just wrote us about. And I believe David was an educator. In fact, Brian sent us this email. You have the answer right there when you compare the calculator use. I have seen many young people, and not too young, that they do not know how to give me the correct change when I pay with cash. They can't add or subtract right at the moment. Okay, it's because of that reliance on technology. What does it mean when you rely so much on technology? What does it mean for their futures?
And as then employers, so now we've added a whole nother group of people into this picture.
When you have AI writing cover letters even.
That's right. So you have to then decide, am I hiring the person or am I hiring the person and their tools? And if you're hiring both the person and their tools, then maybe you're fine with that individual not knowing a particular skill. I think basic arithmetic is probably not one I would want to say, let's let that one go by the wayside.
That you do need to build that for sure to move forward.
But if someone using these kinds of tools can now get out many more emails that are supportive of our organization, rather than one email a day, maybe they can do 20, then I'm going to say maybe that's better for the organization. And I do want to start doing my job interview more about the person and the tools that they have access to and they know how to use effectively.
You started off by saying it's going to be a wild year ahead. Are you nervous at all?
I'm nervous about that first set of assignments coming in, but I also already have in the syllabus that first class is going to be talking about how we use these tools.
Really?
And getting their perspective on it. Yeah. You can't just sort of say it's here. It can't just be parachuted in. It really needs to be a thoughtful, a mindful. I often say stop, look, and listen, and then try and mix together a set of approaches, and then share the ones that worked and the ones that didn't work. That is a great way of learning AI or not. So I'm looking forward to that part.
Okay, this year there will be a lot of learning for both students and teachers and educators as well, I imagine. Really great to speak with you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Terry Griffith is a professor at Simon Fraser University, the Keith Beattie Chair in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. Now, CBC will continue this conversation tomorrow on The Early Edition. This week, the show has a series called Beyond the Books, How AI is Disrupting Vancouver Classrooms. It's about the opportunities and challenges programs like ChatGPT are creating for schools. And tomorrow, they will hear from 3 teachers in the Lower Mainland. That's tomorrow on The Early Edition on CBC Radio 1. That's it for our show today. Thanks so much for everyone's calls and emails as well. Really good to have you on the show today. You can always let us know your thoughts. bctoday@cbc.ca. You can listen on the CBC Listen app and watch us on demand on YouTube. I'm Michelle Eliot. Have a great afternoon.